Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind, and I have the honor of introducing Matt Fitzgerald, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Tend. Tend is the early stage company disrupting the dental industry through tech and hospitality touchpoints. Its studios are equipped with state of the art technology, offering general dentistry, orthodontics, cosmetic treatments, oral surgery, and even handles emergencies. He led the brand's launch in 2019, overseeing its growth from the opening of its first location in New York City to several new market entries around the country. 10 actually now has 23 locations in 5 major metros. Before 10, Matt was the senior vice president of marketing at HelloFresh's US division, where he grew revenue from 10 million to over $1 billion in just 4 years, making it the #1 meal kit in the country. Thanks for coming on the show, Matt.
It's my pleasure. Happy to be here.
You have like such a killer resume, but one thing that I noticed about your background is you actually funded your own company called Cool Beans. You know, it manufactures healthy, all natural hummus, Whole Foods markets, organic groceries, stock your food. In your 4 years at the helm of that company, like, what are you most proud of having accomplished?
Well, it was honestly a lot of fun to launch a brand like that and to kind of create a product. I actually founded the business with my brother. So
Oh,
working
brilliant.
with him personally, that was, maybe the best part of it all. But I will say being able to kind of fight our way onto the shelves of Whole Foods, I mean, the badge value of saying, hey, we are in hundreds of Whole Foods locations kind of across the country. There's like a legitimacy to that. Your mom and dad, when they're saying, oh, what does your son do? Oh, he sells something at Whole Foods. People actually know what that is. And that was a lot of hard work. And, we chased a lot of executives there to get in front of them, to then get slotting, at the store. And so I think that probably was our, from a business point of view, our best achievement.
That's a tough business from what I understand, right? That's a kind of a really cutthroat to get the floor space, right?
It is incredibly competitive because even like a Whole Foods, they probably have anywhere between 30 and 50,000 SKUs in a location. They probably have multiple competitive options within your own category. You're not making lots of money on any individual unit, right? I mean, you're talking, even with good margins, a buck or two, so you have to have high velocity, and if it doesn't move, they won't keep it on the shelves. So there's so much that goes into it to make it successful at the shelf level. It's awfully competitive and hard.
I love that kind of background and context, right? Because you're a world-class marketer, and I find that with marketing, there's so many kind of misconceptions. But my personal experience working with marketers, there's a lot more in common with like almost like a finance or like a very technical, very like nuts and bolts um, figures. Like, how does one kind of gain those like technical skills or that business acumen to succeed in your role?
Yeah, I think marketing more and more is getting quantitative in
Right.
nature. And I think there's two parts to that, right? There is a financial component, right? Marketing tends to have budget for media and other investments. And so, of course, you have to partner closely with finance, and you have to do budgeting and financial planning and, kind of reconciliation at the end of a month or quarter, right? So you have to be numerate just to handle the P&L. But then I think that, the digital environments and your website or your mobile app, whatever it might be, throws off so much data that you have to be able to organize it and analyze it and try to find insights into it so that you can build better performance over time. I think it is important to acknowledge, though, that depending on how you conceptualize, say, a marketing function at a company, there can be really two parts to it, right? There could be kind of the hard numbers-based growth side, right? Which is we need to go acquire companies and build revenue. And then there can be the softer storytelling side. And that's maybe more where brand skills would sit: designers, copy, photographers, editors. And the two have to live together. but they can have very different backgrounds and very different skill sets. And sometimes you have to figure out how to manage that all.
In your experience, do you find it difficult to hire kind of that like performance, that quantitative heavy side of marketing?
Well, I look for something very specific. I've been doing this a while now, and
Mm,
I've hired hundreds of people.
I bet.
So it is hard. And sometimes performance can be at conflict with brand, because, sometimes what draws a click or a conversion event may not necessarily be on brand. It may be salesy. It may lack certain maybe design, finesse, but it works. It's effective. So I do look for, quantitative skills. I look for, my current VP of growth, has a statistics background. She's incredibly analytical. And that's really helpful. Or I might look at previous places you've been in. And if I know that while they take a quantitative approach as well, that's really helpful. I almost always have some kind of an exam as part of an interview process, like nothing crazy, but like a little take-home Excel that, can demonstrate that you have some fluency in managing the software and you can do the analysis. So I do the best we can to kind of find those examples within someone's candidacy. And then, of course, there's a part of me that I also have to train them up. They're not going to have everything on day one. And I think if we have the right culture on the team, and really commit to a successful onboarding, you can try to shore up any gaps or weaknesses.
Now, I mean, with you like more than a decade in like marketing leadership experience, like, is there a reason someone should not get into marketing?
I love it personally. I mean, the reason I got into it in the first place is, especially marketing in the consumer environment, is I think it's fun to be maybe that little source of joy during the day for an individual, right? Like that's a fun concept for me. And I kind of shied away from maybe banking or consulting. These days, all tech is also part of that maybe more traditional mix, because I wanted to do something that had a positive impact on the individual. Where marketing can be tricky is, and just something to think about is marketing valued at that company? What is really the core competency of that company? And a lot of times it will look like a marketing company, but it's really an operations company or an engineering company, right? And so you just have to make sure that if you're going to be in marketing at a company that has core competencies that are not yours, that you're comfortable that you may not have the same influence on outcomes, or other stakeholders may be making the decision, even if you're trying to influence it. And so that would be one thing to think about. The other thing to think about, and we live in tough times, is that sometimes marketing is one of the first places you go if you need to reduce headcount or pare back budgets, right? Because we spend money to make money. And so you got to be able to kind of tough that out, and that's not always easy if you're going through a downturn and you have to kind of tighten the purse strings. That's hard, and not everyone will want to do that.
That always surprises me because, over the last, since the last quarter or so of 2022 and into now, yeah, I've seen that recruiters, marketers, sales. But from my perspective, like if you let go of the marketing people and the sales people, well, then you're really not bringing in new clients, new customers. So am I missing something with that? From the outside perspective, I mean, you're inside, I'm from the outside, like it just didn't make sense when I would start looking to see, on LinkedIn, when you see the, open to work, banners and saying, hey, I lost my job. Yeah. Lots of marketers, sales, recruiters.
No, I see the world the same way. I think in the short term, even if it makes your financial statements look a little bit better, you're then going to actually slow down growth in the future, right? Because by the time you say, okay, look, things have stabilized, let's bring the marketers back, you got to get them, you got to onboard them. It takes time to have impact. So you're actually, maybe fine in the first X 90 days, your P&L looks a little bit better, but give me 2 quarters, give me 3 quarters. I think you're going to see slower growth. I think the misconception here is some marketing teams can be inefficient, right? So if you are burning cash on customer acquisition, then sure, like you probably don't have the right people leading that team, or you don't have the right org design on that team. But if your marketing is efficient, right, you're inside of margin, maybe on your first sale, or your payback period is relatively small, then yeah, I would say that the marketing team is not putting the organization at risk of burning cash. And that may not be the most prudent place to go to, scale back budgets, reduce headcount. So I think it depends on how the team is run and the KPIs that are important to the business.
Yeah, I always found the dynamics of marketing quite interesting, right? On that note, a lot of growth methods or a lot of the performance tactics are online, they're dynamic, they're auction based. And when you see competitors pulling out their marketing budget, maybe it's because I'm not a marketer, but that seems like the perfect time to like spend, right? Because it's maybe cheaper or might be more efficient when everyone's kind of scared.
Yeah, I mean, when you reduce competition, it's certainly helpful. And so on Google, on Facebook, et cetera, sure. Like I love it when words don't cost as much, and these can be very competitive categories. And so you're right. I mean, that is true. And so and you can see that, when competition kind of steps back, you do see, okay, we've now liberated some search terms or inventory access. And so I agree with you. I think that's when you then press your advantage. And that's what we even are doing today. Like right now, this is a great time of year, say for healthcare, because a lot of times in the beginning of the year, you have benefit renewal, people get into healthy habits, they go see their doctors again. Now is the time to invest, even though everyone would say everyone's pulling back. I would say, depending on your category, now's the time you actually should be putting the pedal to the metal, and then maybe scale back a little bit later. So I think you're right. It's a competitive advantage if you can do that.
Now, speaking of healthcare, would you like to maybe share a little bit about your new venture that you're doing and that you want to talk to the audience about?
Sure. So 10 launched in technically October of 2019 with our first location in New York City. And we kind of had the audacious idea that we want to fundamentally transform what it means to go to the dentist. We had done a tremendous amount of research that basically says everybody goes to the dentist. Very few people are enjoying it. The NPS of dental is 1, which is very low. Right. And we kind of said, well, why is that? What is unpleasant about this experience?
Everything.
Well, there's some truth to that actually, and how we built 10 as a result. But the big thing was that we learned, our big insight was that people feel judged. And I think probably everyone has heard some version of this, like, ooh, red wine, do you drink some red wine? Oh, you're flossing. It doesn't maybe look like you're flossing enough. Oh, that tooth doesn't look so good. And you're kind of put in an awkward position. You're in the chair, you're kind of being made to feel judged and that you're not doing enough and you need treatment. And so we said, well, what if there's no judgment at 10? And in order to do that, how do we do that? And so we decided to build a hospitality brand in dental. And to do that, we examined every detail, the locations, all the materials when we build these things out, sights, sounds, smells, like it's, highly personalized. We use a lot of digital and technology. It's a very modern experience. Like there's no paper in any of our locations, right? I mean, we want this thing to be, a really great digital and physical hybrid experience. And it's been great. I mean, it turned out that people were craving that actually from this part of healthcare, because our NPS, I can't share it, unfortunately, is sky high compared to the category. Demand for our appointments, thank gosh, it's very strong. And it's consistently, we see it in the feedback, that like I'd stop going. I was afraid to go. I had stress and people would cry when they would go. And now they found an alternative. And that's really important because if you want to have healthy oral health, basically, going is really important. And if we said the expression, look forward to the dentist, I mean, people laughed at us when we said that. And that's exactly what people say back to us. Like, I now look forward to going to the dentist. And so that's been really cool to see how the experience of everything and every little detail has made such an enormous impact with what we call the members, and in the marketplace.
Now, Matt, are these corporate owned, franchised, or how does it work?
Yeah, so we could call it corporate owned. We as Tend own all of them. Now, due to healthcare regulation, we can't officially own all of them outright. So there's like a sub corporation and partners with that. Some of that is that in a clinical environment, you need some independence in terms of decision making for clinical outcomes, right? The doctor needs to be independent to give you the best care possible and not have someone say, well, we would prefer to do more of X procedure. And what do? We offer marketing services, real estate, technology, training and development, recruiting for staffing. So we provide the totality of the experience, but there's just kind of some legal protections really to protect the patient.
So that's so interesting because, when Rick first mentioned about Tend and I looked into it, I'm thinking, I was trying to wrap my head around it. And then it makes sense because as a business person, as an entrepreneur, you want to find something that you could change and make better. Why would you be the umpteenth person having like a work product solution? Like how many are they that exist now? Hey,
Yeah.
here's a suite of problems you could do for work and whatever. It's just so overdone. So you're just like another one. But here you're looking, say, hey, what's an area we could really take that has an image problem that everyone will agree that they're not enjoying their visit. So let's make this better, cooler, fun.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, what we actually love about dental is it's a massive category, right? The addressable market is huge. I mean, it's like $165 billion. They're very strong unit economics. Like that's been proven. There have been dentists for hundreds of years, right? So like, that's not it. It's just a brand like this has never really been applied to a category, and using as much, digital and technology as possible. Like it just doesn't exist. And that's not to say that, there aren't good dentists out there. There are lots of good dentists out there. But in terms of this level of experience and how we kind of conceived it, we made a very big bet on brand, and we said, let's go after major metros with this brand. And let's see if we can't, break through what is a fairly crowded category. And so far, thankfully, it proves that logic really worked.
I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but overnight, it seems, in my area in New Jersey, there's Med City MD. I don't know if they have it in other areas. Rick, I don't know if it has that out in California. And overnight, they started calling them docs in a box.
Okay.
But then I would go to them and I realized this is fantastic. So instead of like having to make an appointment that's going to be 3 months from now, and if it's nothing serious, I could just go to City MD. And then there's some others as well in my area that you could just go in and within a reasonable time, they're going to see you and they'll take a look and all that. And it's like, wow, that's a really smart thing. Why didn't they have this before? It's so convenient, especially during COVID time. Like, do I have COVID? Do I not? Is it a cold?
Right.
Is it this? Let me just go in and get it checked. And it makes it really easy to do.
Well, multi-site healthcare seems to be growing in prominence, right? There's lots of terrific examples. One Medical, probably the standard bearer, and they were acquired by Amazon last year. You have Oak Street Health, which is another primary care concept, like 160 plus locations. CVS just bought them. So I think people are starting to appreciate that, yes, there are other ways to kind of provide care, to provide it, with quality, consistency, make it convenient, right? And so we're seeing a proliferation across a lot of different categories, actually, where these multi-site concepts are popping up. Brand is more part of it. Technology is more part of it. And for you, that may meet your need state, right? And so it can be helpful.
Yeah. Can I just share an anecdote that
Please.
you're free to use in your marketing literature?
Okay.
So I could go back to little Jack Kelly when he was getting his braces off. It was uncanny. The moment my parents paid off for the braces, mysteriously my teeth were done and we let go, even though they were still crooked. But I didn't care because I was like, I just want these braces off. Let me get out of here. And to this day, they're still crooked. So all right, that was my first experience. Like, wow, this sucks. Then as an adult, just fairly recently, I guess I had a wisdom tooth that I had to pull out. So me being a big baby, like most guys are, I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't have to do it until my wife dragged me. Brings me into a dentist office within my area. And it was disheveled. It was dirty, seriously, like wallpaper peeling off. I'm looking at the implements of torture and they were like rusty. And it was like out of Saw 5, the movie. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to go. And she shamed me into doing it. And it was just a horrible experience because the guy looked like a Dracula guy. He really looked, pale. Yeah. Almost like out of a bad movie, and this is so like, it's just such an uncomfortable, unpleasant situation to be in. Then I forgot to say, when I'm in the waiting room, you go and you're reading the magazines from like 5 years ago that everybody's had their paws all over. I couldn't think of like it's just a more unpleasant situation. So I could see, to juxtapose it with you're trying to do is just change it completely. So that's not the unpleasant experience that people are getting, right?
Well, there's a few things there. It's hard to be a dentist. You're a small business owner in many respects. And, the reason that you are a dentist is because a long time ago, you decided you want to go to school, you wanted to help people. This was an interesting part of healthcare. It wasn't to like run the books or do scheduling or have cool design of an office, right? Like, there are all these other things that they have to do after hours, right? They have full patient schedules every day. And so, that's hard to keep up, Two, I think there's the like dentist of people's imagination. And it's kind of what you're describing, right? A childhood experience that informed their long-term view. And so that's maybe also who we're competing against, right? Is that the concept of the dentist? And then for us, we offer a range of services. So we do, you come for your hygiene visit. That's a traditional way to start a relationship with a new dentist. You may have restorative needs. You may also want to do orthodontics or have oral surgery needs, like a wisdom tooth extraction, or you have an emergency and you want to be seen now, So we actually offer comprehensive services. I almost think of them as little dental hospitals, because instead of referring you to someone else, we would rather you, kind of refer with intent and have our standard of care, our kind of consistent, brand approach, that we have all of the patient notes then, right? We're not.
So it's all in network, basically.
Yeah. I mean, because we have an app and we have your profile. And so we have all your clinical history. We have your photographs, x-rays.
And you don't have to fill out on a piece of paper with that like wooden board and the clip thing.
Exactly. It's we call it intake. You can do it before you go. And if you move locations or jobs or whatever, it all is a very seamless experience. And so, yeah, like we think that provides a higher level of care as a result. And I think we're probably the first kind of network that is going to provide an actual like network effect where with an app and multiple locations, people tend to move around in city environments. It doesn't mean you have to, just because you change neighborhoods or change the job, that you necessarily have to change your dentist.
It makes a lot of sense. There's a dentist office in my town where they cater to younger kids who are getting braces and things like that. And it's really cute because they'll have like, it'll be Hawaiian Day and everybody wears, like a Hawaiian clothes, or when someone gets their braces off, they have a little party and, they sing a song. So to a certain degree, it's not what you're doing, but it just shows that people are starting to say, wait, we don't have to be the same way it was. We can make it better. It doesn't have to be this literally painful and figuratively painful, experience that you're going through, and make it more enjoyable and make it, it's something you have to do. So you might as well, have a little fun doing it, enjoy it a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, retail these days in retail, right? Because there's a retail component to this, right? We have street level locations, there's foot traffic. I mean, you can't be mediocre, right? You have to be extraordinary. The consumer is expecting more. And if you look at, and if we just step outside of healthcare, but you look at some of the aging kind of retailers who are struggling, because not all retail is struggling. A lot of retail has bounced way back and is doing very well. It's ones that have not kind of updated their experience and incorporated technology and modernity and, you know, a digital experience into it. And so I think you should have these fun experiences. And I think dentistry has to come along. And if we set that standard, great, you know, and if others want to catch up, you know, let's go. But I don't see why you would settle for mediocrity, especially from healthcare.
Do you also have like teeth whitening and teeth straightening, and instead of like, let's say for an adult who wants to kind of do something, what are they, Invisaligns and whatever that may be?
Yeah, we have a couple different ortho options. We do offer whitening as well. What we do when you first become a patient with 10 is you do fill out a couple of forms online. It will be, you know, your insurance, a credit card on file, but it may ask what your goals are. You know, we want to know. For some people, they just want straight, healthy teeth, right? That's important to them. It turns out straighter teeth are easier to care for, and so therefore you might do whatever it takes to make sure they're straight, so you have better at-home care, and then you'll have better visits in the future. Some people, it's aesthetics. You know, they veneers or orthodontics, like it's not, you know, goal-based, it's more for the aesthetics. And because even how you kind of move your teeth around, it can actually change your entire like face, almost like how you smile and things like that. You can notice a difference if someone has gone on an aesthetic journey to improve their smile. So it's important for the patient to signal to us what they would like to achieve.
From a marketing perspective, do you make it when you like come in to the office that like everything is different in terms of from the music to the ambiance to, you know, just the whole, that type of experience? Is that something that you work on?
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, day in and day out, really. But yes, there is music, you know, we do curate lists and we keep them fresh, because the big thing with music, it may not be the patient who tires of it, but if the staff is there every day and it's the same 10 songs, you better believe they're going to get tired. So it's almost like we got to keep it, you know, different every day just to keep the staff engaged. But we think about these things. We want our environment to be soothing, right? We want you to be at ease so that you're comfortable, and you'll talk about your lifestyle factors, and you might be open if you need treatment to accepting it, because we use different tools that are not as loud or don't smell bad or don't make weird sounds or whatever it might,
That's possible? That could be done?
it is, yeah, absolutely. But there's also fun things you can do to you know, engage the patient. Like we'll have, you know, we got TVs on with movies on and noise canceling headphones and sunglasses to block the glare. So by the time you're all said and done, maybe you're not thinking about it as much. You're not, you know, in your head being like, uh-oh, they're about to, you know, put a drill in my mouth. Like you can do things to help someone have a more comfortable experience. It doesn't mean that dentistry is pain-free. Unfortunately, that's just not true in healthcare, but there are lots of things you can do to make someone a lot more comfortable.
Makes
I
so much
love
sense. Like you get, I don't mean to be, this is for real. Like I can see even putting on like virtual glasses, metaverse as it gets, you know, rolled
Yes.
out, where you just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to chill. I'm going to watch a movie. I'm going to, you know, just get into the metaverse and do whatever. And maybe have some headphones on so you don't hear what's going on. You don't hear the drills. You don't hear anything. You're in your own world. And then before you know it, you're done. You're like, oh, this was fun. This is cool.
Absolutely. I've heard the opposite too. I heard someone who was like took a Zoom call or something because of the screen and something like that, and they wanted to keep their meeting schedule, I guess. So they were leveraging the technology for that. So I'm sure there's lots of different applications, but there's no reason why you couldn't do that. And that's the sort of thing we need to evolve over time, right? An organization such as 10, which is using innovation and disruption as, you know, kind of a galvanizing force, we can never lose that. Right? Because then you wake up 10 years from now and we're just like everyone was before, right? We get tired and the concept doesn't stay dynamic and relevant. And so we have to keep pushing the envelope.
one thing that I love looking at your kind of career is that there seems to be this kind of like arc or like this kind of trend line or storyline in terms of like, oh, I'm just going to spend my life really focused on like solving real problems and like making people's lives better, right? In a tangible way. Like, how can I get people to live healthier lives, right? And healthfulness just gets a bad rap sometimes, right? It's like unattainable, or it's too
Yeah.
difficult, or it's too costly.
Yeah.
Like, what is that marketing challenge involved in, you know, to put it plainly, like getting people to do something that they don't necessarily want to do?
Well, two in a row, because getting people to cook is not easy. And
Right.
getting people to go to the dentist is not easy. So at HelloFresh, there were some people that thought cooking in America is dead and no one wants to cook ever again. And I love cooking. Like, I grew up in a house where we ate dinner together 6 nights a week. And the one night we didn't eat dinner was Saturday night because my parents went on a date every Saturday, and they've been married for 55 years. So there's something to cooking and being home and taking time to like be with your loved ones. And we did the best we could to help, right? Like, we would do the recipe cards and we'd simplify things and use words that people understood. And we didn't make it chefy. And like, we tried to make it convenient for the individual, because it is hard. There is work to chopping, and you got to clean the pans when they're done. And it's not the most fun part of it. So we did everything we could to help the home cook. And it was real food, and it was balanced. You could feel good about it. And we heard wonderful stories of people saying, you helped my child grow in confidence because they could do your meals, and then they got better at school. And, this is how, you saved my marriage because we took 3 nights a week to cook together. I mean, the feedback was just, tear inducing. But I knew that. I knew food has that kind of power. But we had to do our best to make it exciting, and we redid the logo and the brand, and did cool partnerships. Right as I was leaving, they partnered with Jessica Alba. Like, let's make it fun. Like, let's make this something where you're proud to do it. I didn't expect that in dental, to be honest, because I kind of thought of it as like your annual service, and you just kind of have to go. And that's kind of what the ADA, American Dental Association, tells you to do. Please go twice a year. And your mom took you when you were younger, and it's a chore, right? Like,
Right.
you just kind of check the box. And again, we just blew it up, and said, let's go build a huge, beautiful brand, and let's change everything about what it means to go. I thought that was cool. And what I didn't expect, though, was these stories of people telling me that like they just stopped going because they had such a traumatic experience, or it stresses them out so much that they can't do that to themselves. They just can't go because it just stresses them out. And then they went and found 10, and they said it just fundamentally transformed what it meant to go. And, they take better care of themselves. And, we had one example where someone went and, was really nervous before they went, and we did everything we could to calm this person down. They had a really lovely experience. And the next day they brought, we call them studios. They brought the studio location donuts just to say thank you for a great experience, And I think when you have two genuine brands trying to do the right thing, trying to really start with the consumer and work backwards, and you get it right, you do start to see higher levels of participation.
How do you create that brand, right? Because there are certain aspirational brands that I think we all can name off the top of our heads, right? Like Apple is one where they just seems to like get marketing and be really like brand focused, right? You've done it now twice, 3 times. Like, how do you build that from scratch and make it stick?
Well, I think you have to start by believing in it, right? I
Okay.
think you actually have to say, wow, brand matters, right? Like, for some companies, it doesn't, and that's okay. You may offer a great service, or it doesn't, you're a utility company, you don't really need it, right? Like, there are just certain things where you're like, it almost doesn't matter what your NPS is. But I think if you're care about brand and it's just part of the founding logic of a business, that really matters. It's awfully hard to fabricate it, because people pick up on that. They know when it's an inauthentic brand. If you work in consumer, you really have to care about the consumer, right? And you have to start with the consumer and understand his or her need state. And are you doing something to address it? You have to be willing to accept feedback. Brands don't stay the same forever. And your consumer, it's a very vocal consumer, will tell you exactly what they like and dislike about your brand, because the brand is the totality of the experience. right? It's every interaction. It's not just the product or the service, because guess what? You're going to get it wrong every once in a while. And when you do, someone's going to call up customer care. Well, that's a brand moment too, and is the staff well trained, and do they have empathy, and can they get to a resolution for you? So I think if you don't have those kind of components and that ethos, it's very hard to then have a breakthrough brand. And I think the organization has to align behind that. That's really important.
And so is it down to how you hire your team members? Like, do they have to kind of know the brand or get on board before they even,
At 10, what's been fun is we've hired patients, actually. People like, I go.
Oh,
I love it. Like, they were living it already. I mean, that's, to me, amazing. Same thing with HelloFresh, people who were getting the boxes every week and cooking the meals. And I mean, when you're in an interview and you're talking about like, oh, did you like the chicken dish from last week? Like, this person's in, or, oh, I just
right.
went last week to get my cleaning. Like, this person's in, like something about the brand connected with them. So I love, when that happens, because I believe in marketing, you have to have your hands on the product or service. You have to go yourself and try to see it from the consumer's point of view. But I look for that. I try to sense, like, is this person enthusiastic about the brand? Do they have a strong point of view on the business itself? They may, doesn't mean you have to be positive, but you may have critical feedback as well. So I really do try to assess the level of engagement. And I will look at the track record of the individual and like, where have they been, and what other kind of examples are out there. But I think it's really important that they live it.
You've kind of given us a sneak peek already in terms of like what the culture is like, but can you share kind of more behind the curtain? Like, what is the day-to-day like at 10? When everyone's so focused on like, how do we make dentistry like not suck, right? And like, how does that kind of like bleed through into all the roles that they're doing, from marketer to recruiter to HR engineering?
Well, I firmly believe that you don't join, an early stage, potentially disruptive, high scale potential company to not want to have impact, and so I think what's important in early stage is that you create a culture of impact, of doing. And so I think our culture is such that we give you lots of room to go do your thing across any part of the organization, because you can't micromanage, and everybody wants to have that impact and say, hey, look, I did that project. That's, I'm accountable for that. I changed the trajectory of the company in a positive way. And so it's a fun, fast-paced culture. There's music on, it's an open floor plan, in our New York hub. It's youthful and energetic. I mean, people are having fun. And a lot of these roles, you end up having to, have cross-functional teams and projects. And so you just got to kind of work together. And I think, people are saying, at first they're like, dental. But then when they realize this is multi-site and the technology that we're building and some of the stuff that we're doing, they see how this is having a larger impact than that. And that's very encouraging. And so I think that's what people like. They want to go and know they're making a difference.
I like that kind of focus on impact, just because it seems like such a nebulous word, right? Where I think the kind of common answer or the common kind of assumption is, oh, well, I can go work at Google or Meta and you have impact because they like literally a billion people touch it, right? Or, my mom knows what Google is, right?
Right.
And I think, well, no, like I find that at a startup or an earlier stage company, right, where you have that flexibility, that autonomy that you might not necessarily get at one of these like larger companies. And, especially at the stage of economy where a lot of people still have the choice to kind of find another job or even move industries. Um, this might be a good career move for people to make.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is actually the bigger thing to tease out in hiring, is that some people say they want to go early stage, right? And early stage is rough, it's rugged, right? You don't have super well put together organizations. You may not have product market fit. Unit economics may not be sorted out. It's never linear up and to the right. It doesn't go like that. It goes up, it goes down. And so some people say that's what they want, right? Because on Friday nights when they're at the bar and they say, oh, I work at XYZ startup, everyone's like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I wish I could do that. And that's fun for some people. But then they get to Monday and they're like, oh my gosh, there's a lack of structure. I'm not entirely sure what the KPIs are. My project just got shut down because we pivoted, right? I mean, that's what this environment is. And they don't like it. And they would prefer to be at a bigger company. That's great, where there's stability and, hey, last year we did it this way, so we're going to do it again this year. But then there are those people that seek it out. They don't want to go work at PepsiCo and every 2 years get a promotion and 25 years from now have a parking spot in their name. They're ambitious and impatient and want to have impact, and they love the uncertainty and the lack of structure of it all because they can then bring certainty and structure to it. And I've seen those people thrive and they get going faster. You can get promoted faster. How do you end up as a VP and you're not even 30? It's like, well, you went and you demonstrated that you know how to grow a business. And so that's the person you're trying to find, not just the people that are like, well, it'd be cool to work there, but I don't really like it. So that's to me like a big tension in these processes.
Now, is that kind of like craziness or kookiness for seeking those kind of adventures out? Like someone or a profile that you would really like benefit from considering working at Tend over some other company?
Yeah, I mean, I always say like no hire is better than bad hire. Like I'll let a role stay open for a really long time, and a good hire can be absolutely transformative. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I love incredibly smart people, hardworking, but you're a good person. Because I also say how you work is much more important than the work itself. If we're going to do this for a lot of hours every week, we away from family and our kids and loved ones, and we better have some fun doing this. And so I do try to figure that out. I'm not the sole person interviewing. There'll be 3 or 4 other people, and try to have a range of personalities to assess, fit to role, fit to team. It's really important, and if there is something, in an interview or part of the process that, your spidey sense starts to get activated, you may take a pause on a candidate because of that. Because a bad hire can really be detrimental to a team or a culture.
I really appreciate that kind of look, right? Because I think it can be very difficult to kind of suss out what it's like to work at a company, right? From the interview. And I think a lot of users on Blind, they kind of think of like kind of the marquee things like, oh, like, is the product cool? Do I get that rep, or do I get like a huge total compensation package, right? And I think it's very easy to get caught up in that race and realize like, oh no, I'm actually interviewing the company just as
Right.
much as they are interviewing me, right? And it's a kind of two-way assessment there.
So I agree with that spot on. I say to candidates all the time, I kind of set up the interview in a very specific way. I say, hey, look, we're not just going to go through your resume. I want this to be a 2-way conversation. This is, yes, we want to get to know you better, but please, you get to know us, because this is a big decision, on both sides. And I say, I'll give you a little bit about myself and the company, so you have like the full context. So that way maybe your answers can be informed by that. And I never ask for the walk through the resume. I just, what do you want? What should I know about you? Like what's interesting? And so we kind of go that way, with it. And I do try to get a sense of that. I ask questions anytime you want, right? Like, let's see what's on top of their mind. And so I think that's important to be clear and direct, and to try to do that, because it is truly 2 ways. It really is. And, it shouldn't just be us talking at you. That's not going to be very constructive.
Are there any like questions that people have asked during the interview process that you've been particularly struck by or that have impressed you?
I think when people ask questions that demonstrate they really understand the business model, it's not just like, oh, like, what are the cultural expectations, or do you use Salesforce, or, how's your approach to Google Analytics? Like, that's less interesting to me, because like it took me a bit to transition from meal kits to healthcare, and healthcare is different, and there are some different rules and expectations. And I think I underappreciated the challenge at first, because I was like, you can run the playbook from meal kits. Well, it's a slightly different playbook. And so asking the questions about the business, really understanding the business model, to me, that demonstrates the person is actually quite curious about the company. And I think curiosity is really important, because it will eventually lead to tenacity, right? I think tenacity is a really important quality at early stage businesses, but you got to start with being curious, right? Like, what's going on? Like, why is something happening? Can I do something about it? I want to do something about it, right? So I do love those questions that are like a little bit more probing on the business, because I try really hard on the team to kind of show the whole picture at the company. And if you're on one of my teams, you're going to get a lot of business information, right? I share the financial result. I talk about org design. What's our roadmap? Where are we going next? I think that's really important. And I want people that kind of can demonstrate that in an interview process.
No, I think that's a great thing to add, right? Because oftentimes I feel like candidates, they're almost embarrassed or anxious when they're asking questions, right? They don't know if like, oh, is this appropriate? Or oh, maybe the guy just won't tell me anyway, or this is probably proprietary or confidential. And so they're just gonna BS me. But that intellectual curiosity is actually quite beneficial.
I think so. And, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. Like, if you don't ask, then you'll never know. And it's, that's kind of on you a little bit, right? And I think people are changing. Like, there was someone on my team who relocated to California. Her husband got into a very prestigious residency program, and, life got in the way. And she was awesome on the team. She was one of the founding team members and was like a rock star at the business. And I told her, I was like, you got to ask really sharp questions about compensation, ask them about their funding, ask them about their runway, their profitability, right? Things that like you can't get online, right? I can't answer those questions like, through AI or some other, online resource. And so you got to start to like understand like what's their plan, because this is my life and my job. Like, and I think a lot of from the outside in, it always looks pretty good. That's not always the case, and I think a savvy person has the right to ask those questions.
Yeah, I want to figure out like, is there one bit of career advice that you often find yourself giving or that you wish more people knew?
I think you do have to take a chance, it's a funny story, and I was talking about it last night with my wife, is that I wanted to be early stage consumer, and my arc was such that I went on business school. I was working in a creative agency, actually. I was like doing some like business development type stuff there, and I just disliked every second of it. It was not for me, and I was miserable. But, early stage stuff, this was like in like 2014, like it wasn't as common as it was today. And New York tech was nothing like it is today. And this is when I started to talk with HelloFresh, and like, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like cooking food at home, and they had a VP of marketing open. And, I was like, this is exactly what I was looking for, quite frankly. And I remember talking to my wife about it, because we were a few months away from getting married. And I was like, I think I might change jobs. And she was like, who's HelloFresh? And why wouldn't you just go work at Blue Apron? And I was like, well, they're not giving out a job, and this is the one I have. And, I get it. We were nothing then. Nobody knew us. And we were a very distant third, and we were much younger organization. And I went, and it was hard because, we're kind of like those guys. But by being in a category I cared about, with a product that I really liked, but at a company that was not necessarily the obvious candidate to win the category, that changed my career.
Wow.
and we did a great job there, and we built it up to something big and beautiful. And I got tons of experience. I mean, we ended up with like well over 100 people in the department and a couple $100 million in ad spend. And we tried everything. And they kept giving me more and more responsibility, build a sales unit, build a creative agency internally, like all this stuff. And that was really helpful. And I was okay if it failed. Like if after 6 months, either I stunk or the company stunk, it was okay. And I was early enough in my career where I could do that. But that was a game changer for me.
It's brilliant. I think that's like quite a good lesson, right? Just be willing to take the chances. I think like early on, my father gave me this advice because I made a career switch from working in politics and lobbying to working into tech and getting into public affairs and PR and communications. And I asked my dad, like, oh, should I do this? Right. I studied politics, loved it. There's an obvious track to go on if you want to succeed in that industry in politics. And my dad said, hey, you're young in your 20s. It's all about learning, right? Like try to find the rocket ship, try to like do something new. Like if that means like moving across the country or moving to another country, do it while this kind of stakes are low, right? Where you don't have a family yet and everyone's equally as broke as you are. So there's no difference, right? And wait till your 30s, and your 30s are for earnings, he would say, right? And say, by then you'll have figured it out and you can just go really deep and like build that T shape.
Yeah, I think the collection of experiences is really important. And how do I know that is like, so I really did not like working at a creative agency, and it's not what I saw for myself long term, but got to pay the bills, got to keep moving forward.
Right.
In hindsight, though, it was terrific. It's actually pivotal to kind of how I run marketing teams now, because inevitably in marketing, you're going to work with agencies. Could be a media agency, creative agency, PR, like there's just a multitude of agencies. The fact that I can look across the table at an agency partner and saying, I've been in your shoes before. I understand the skills that your agency has, the personnel, the unit economics, like how you do billing, that you hate when clients on a Friday afternoon ask you to get something done that day or first thing Monday or ruin a holiday. And it gave me a lot of street cred, and I think how we manage agencies is appropriate and good. And I think you can be firm but fair, but I can see it from their point of view as well. And so that was like, honestly, a blessing in disguise. And so that's the collection of the experience. You never know when they're going to you're going to lean into them, right? It could be tomorrow or it could be 10 years from now, but it does give you kind of more range, I would say.
I love that. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with us, Matt.
Well, I don't know if people would perceive it as wisdom, but fun certainly to talk with you guys.
No, you're too
Well, thank you
biased.
so much.